So hello guys, how are you all? So hope you guys all are doing well. So today we are going to start another standards, and it is very important standards for CA final students especially. Uh, the name of the essay is Essay 240. It deals with guys fraud. So the essay we are going to cover is essay 240. So let's start guys from question number 1. Question number 1 says, who is responsible to prevent and detect fraud? The primary responsibility for the primary responsibility for the prevention and detection of fraud rests with both management and TCWG. First point. Second point is management through emphasis of strong internal control strong internal control may reduce opportunity for fraud to take place. So first question guys हमने complete करा. Now move on to second question. Question number 2 says how much auditor is responsible for detection of fraud. तो देखते हैं guys. Answer is auditor is responsible to obtain reasonable assurance that financial statements are free from material misstatement resulting fraud or error. First point. Now the second point is due to inherent limitations of audit, there may be possibilities of some undetected misstatements, even though audit was properly planned. Audit was properly planned, even though audit was properly planned and conducted as per standards on auditing and other regulatory requirements. So, second question is also completed. Now move on to question number third. Uh, on next page, guys. Question number third says steps involved in assessing the risk of material misstatement. So we have to write down here steps. So answer step number 1, understanding the entity and its internal control. As per Essay 315, before applying procedures, auditor should obtain an understanding of entity which enables him to detect fraud prone areas. Step number 1. Now moving on to step number 2. Step number 2 is inquiries through management regarding following. So number 1 point is management assessment of fraud risk factor. So how process, how these 4 points we have to cover. So what here indicates what is the method of management assessment of fraud, how frequently management management assess the same process for conducting assessment, how the entity communicate, how मैनेजमेंट लिखते हैं गाइस यहाँ पे, हाउ मैनेजमेंट कम्युनिकेट द आइडेंटिफिकेशन process to all employees and staff. तो यहाँ पे हमने सेकंड पॉइंट कवर करा गाइस. नाउ मूविंग ऑन टू थर्ड पॉइंट, थर्ड स्टेप. Step number 3, knowledge about suspected fraud. Auditor should inquire from the management whether they have any knowledge of actual, suspected and alleged fraud. Step number 3, inquiry from internal auditor. Auditor should inquire whether internal auditor has any knowledge about actual, suspected and alleged fraud plus his opinion. ठीक है गाइस, स्टेप नंबर 4 भी कंप्लीट करा हमने. नाउ मूविंग ऑन टू लास्ट स्टेप. Step number 5, result of auditor. गाइस एक्चुअली क्या था, ये स्टेप नंबर 2 का सेकंड पॉइंट होगा मेरे हिसाब से, एंड दिस इज अवर थर्ड पॉइंट एंड दिस वन इज फोर्थ वन. सो फोर्थ पॉइंट सेज रिजल्ट ऑफ ऑडिटर एनालिटिकल रिव्यू प्रोसीजर. At initial stage, auditor perform certain analytical review procedure after performing these procedure. Auditor should evaluate the results and examine all unusual relationships and examine all unusual relationships which may indicate possible which may indicate possible chances of fraud to take place. तो गाइस ये हमने स्टेप्स करे कि उसको रिस्क को असेस करने के लिए कौन कौन से स्टेप्स होते हैं. डोंट वरी गाइस, ये पूरा स्टैंडर्ड हम समझेंगे, डिटेल में समझेंगे. बस अभी एक बार नोटिंग की तरफ ध्यान दीजिएगा गाइस. गाइस एक सेकेंड को पेपर लेकर आना होगा. So let's continue. Question number 4. Responses towards assessed risk of material misstatement by auditor. तो देखते हैं गाइस. ओवरऑल रिस्पॉन्स. Overall response for determining overall response, auditor shall depute the adequate engagement team which has knowledge of significant engagement terms which has knowledge of significant engagement terms and auditors assessment of risk of material misstatement due to fraud in engagement. तो फर्स्ट पॉइंट कवर करा गाइस हमने. नाउ मूविंग ऑन टू सेकंड पॉइंट, ऑडिटर्स रिस्पॉन्स टू असर्शन लेवल. गाइस आपको ऐसे काफ़ी लेंथी लग रहा होगा, बट अगर आप इतना नहीं करेंगे तो गाइस आप अच्छे स्कोर नहीं कर सकते इस पर्टिकुलर एसे में. अगर आप प्रैक्टिस मैनुअल खोल के देखेंगे, इस पर्टिकुलर एसे की एक अपनी ही अलग ही वेटेज है गाइस. मैं सीए फाइनल स्टूडेंट्स के लिए बात कर रहा हूँ. एक्चुअली आईपीसीसी का मेरे को आइडिया नहीं है, लेकिन दोनों के लिए ये एक इम्पोर्टेंट एसे है. और कहीं ना कहीं ये अगर इसका क्वेश्चन आएगा तो वो एक हमारा लॉ पे सेक्शन होगा 143, सेक्शन 143 सब सेक्शन. मेरे को एक फ्रॉड का गाइस एक सेक्शन आया था नया 143(12) आई गाइस कि 143(12) है, जिसमें सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट को रिपोर्टिंग होती है फ्रॉड की. तो उसके साथ कहीं ना कहीं लिंक कर कर ये स्टैंडर्ड का क्वेश्चन हमारे को पूछा जा सकता है। तो गाइस अभी हम क्या कर रहे हैं, खाली स्टैंडर्ड कवर कर रहे हैं। इसके बाद जब हम लॉ में उसको अपनी कंपनी ऑडिट को कवर करेंगे, उसके बाद गाइस हम इस स्टैंडर्ड को और उन पर्टिकुलर स्टैंडर्ड को एंड पर्टिकुलर सेक्शन को कंपनी एक्ट के दोनों को कोरिलेट करके देखेंगे। सो डोंट वरी गाइस, इतना तो आपको करना ही पड़ेगा। वो मैम की बुक का छोटा सा जो समरी है, इतनी सी समरी है वो, इतनी सी गाइस, वो नहीं चलेगी, कसम से गाइस नहीं चलेगी। ऑडिटर्स रिस्पॉन्स to assertion level. In accordance with SA 330, auditor shall perform further audit procedure which or the further audit procedure whose nature, timing and extent are responsive to the assessment of risk of material misstatement by auditor. ठीक है guys. Third point is, sorry, in order to in accordance with SA 330, auditor shall perform further audit procedure whose nature, timing and extent are responsive to the assessment of risk of material misstatement by auditor in order to satisfy himself that that management not misused its position to give a room for fraud to take place. He should ensure he shall apply following procedures. तो देखते हैं गाइस कौन से प्रोसीजर्स हैं वो। पॉइंट नंबर 1, टेस्ट जनरल एंट्रीज, examine the persons who are involved in the processing of journal entry. First point. Second point is, select the journal entries and other adjustments at the end of the reporting period. Now the third point is evaluate whether there is need to retest the journal entries. So first point हमने cover करा. Now moving on to second point. Sorry. First point. This one is second point. Second point says review accounting estimates involved. Risk of material misstatement is high where estimates or judgments are used. Risk of material misstatement is high where estimates or judgments are used due to involvement of subjectivity. So the should ensure auditor should ensure auditor क्या करेगा? Auditor should examine the reasonableness of judgments and estimates involved. तो गाइस इसी के साथ हमारा फोर्थ क्वेश्चन कंप्लीट होता है. नाउ मूविंग ऑन टू क्वेश्चन नंबर 5. Question number 5 says how auditor should respond to identified or suspected fraud. How auditor should respond if when audit evidence showing that there is a material that there is a misstatement, the auditor shall evaluate whether such a misstatement is indicative of fraud. If yes, then auditor should evaluate its implications on the following. First point is reliability of WR. Second point is impact on the nature, timing and extent of the procedures. Third point is whether circumstances indicate that there is collusion among employees, that there is a collusion involving employees, management and third parties. ठीक है guys. when auditor when auditor confirm when auditor confirms that financial statements are materially misstated as a resulting fraud, then issue qualified or adverse opinion. So guys, fifth question भी हमारा complete होता है. Now moving on to question number 6. Question number 6 says, can auditor decide to withdraw from engagement? Can auditor decide to withdraw from engagement? So the first point is determine the legal and professional requirement, responsibility applicable in the circumstances. Consider whether it is appropriate to withdraw from engagement where withdrawal is